Hey guys, so back again. This will probably be like episode 3. This is actually going to be starting to take the FG2 that we've got here after we remove the majority of the factory components as far as intake manifold, etc. And we're actually going to start making the necessary changes in the engine bay to put this supercharger on. What we're actually going to start with, I like to start at the bottom and work my way up, is we're actually going to start with the thermostat housing. And thermostat, we're going to be swapping the 8th Gen one over to an EP3 style thermostat housing and thermostat. And we're going to be trimming the lower radiator hose and showing you guys how to make that work just fine. So that is what we're going to be doing first. What you're going to need to disconnect as we get in here is, here's your thermostat housing and the thermostat itself. It does have this hard line that runs up across the top of the motor. You saw us earlier, we removed the 12mm bolt here and the 10mm bolt here that secures it onto the block. It is O-ringed into the thermostat housing. So in order to get that off, you're just going to kind of give it some twists and some pulling up, and it will pop right out of there. You probably have some grime and some grit and stuff. You go ahead and clean off of there, and then we'll reinstall it into the new one. You're also going to need to remove this wiring clip here. And we're going to go ahead and break the lower radiator hose free in order to remove this from the vehicle. And that's what we're going to get started on here. George is doing all the work because he likes to. If you didn't catch it on the break, we definitely cleaned up the engine some. Gets a little dirty under the stock intake manifold. Once again, using the grab and twist method to break some radiator hoses free. And you may make a little bit of a mess, even though we did drain the majority of the coolant out of the car. Well, it's dry there. I'll take it. And we do have a bucket under the car. We're draining the remaining of the coolant in from the lower radiator hose.
It's on the way.
It is. So there are 3 bolts that hold the thermostat housing to the water pump housing. They are 10mm, and they can be a little bit of a pain to get to, but they generally come out pretty easily. The thermostat housing is just O-ringed up against the water pump housing, so it does come apart pretty easily as well. 10mm number 2 is kind of hidden in the back. If you got to get just the right combination of extensions and sockets and or a swivel to get back there. Looks like a 3/8 deep 10-inch is doing, or deep 10mm is doing the trick just fine. Yet again, removing the upper radiator support is what's giving us all this freedom of movement in here.
So I don't want to break the infamous knock sensor.
So around here we do have a little bit of PTSD when it comes to knock sensors.
I'm going with a wrench.
That is factual. If you see here, the knock sensor on the K series is located right here, and I don't know about the other cars, but on the 8th gens, this thing does get pretty fragile and pretty brittle. You definitely don't want to pull on any of these wires or apply any pressure, or this thing will just fall right apart. So we're trying to be as careful as possible working around it, because it does function just fine. And they're about $100 to replace. If you were wondering, our recommendation is always using OEM when it comes to knock sensors, unless George has a different recommendation.
Well, there's the older K-series knock sensor. You just have to change the plug. It's better rigid. People say, oh, the ktuner, that's a fucking old school freaking K-series.
Well, there you have it. For George, wiring is kind of like his first language, so it's nothing to him. So he's also removing the clip at the top of the harness that goes into the thermostat housing.
I think we're ready.
And then we will go ahead and pull this out. So it should just pop off. There's all the coolant that's leaking out. Perfect placement of the bucket. And then we're
That's because ESPN is turned off. You know, we got our own sports here.
So you see he's twisting and a little bit of rocking motion to get that hard line out of the top of the thermostat housing.
It's really close to that knock sensor though.
It is. You get some twisting in there. So it's an O-ring. No sealer or anything on it, and when it's dry it is kind of a pain to get to remove. Alright, so we have it out. It does still have the soft crossover line on, which we're going to be moving over to the other thermostat housing. Here's our 8th Gen 1 removed. You can see it has the upward portion, or the upward slant to it. The EP3 one is around here somewhere, and I actually need to make a note on that. You do have to trim off a tab off of it. Where's the EP3 one at, George?
Should be over there with the engine or on top of someone's crap.
Okay, walking. Ah, here they are. All right. So, hiding over here under the turbo car, you see that this is the EP3 style thermostat housing, and it has the harness clip down here at the bottom. I'm touching there with my middle finger, and you will have to trim that off or it will hit against the air conditioning pump in the 8th Gen. The 8th Gen has the tab up here, as you saw him just remove. The EP3 has it down here, and you will have to trim it off. The best way to do that I've found, honestly, is either some perseverance and a razor blade or a Dremel, and just go ahead and pop that off where it sits flush on the backside.
You can also use some diamond cutting tool to sand it.
Use some what now? Who now?
Plier cutting.
Oh yeah, or you can use what they call some dikes, some side cutters. Those guys there will also get the job done. Oh, here we go. We doing it?
Oh, we can. Why not?
Sure, why not? There you go. Wow, that was much easier than a Dremel. Okay,
yeah.
I'm converted.
Done.
There we have it. Pops right off. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this down over here. You'll notice we do spend a decent amount of time cleaning. George likes clean things.
That's what she said.
Ooh. These videos may not be PG, or they'll be edited.
What's the new housing?
New housing is in the battery thing right here. Woot, woot. So what we were saying before is it is O-ringed. You want to make sure the O-ring is not damaged and that it is sticking out past the mounting surface so that it does seal well against the water pump housing. If you've got a whole bunch of grit and stuff down there, make sure to take care to clean that so that you can get a good O-ring seal against it. If you go to install the whole supercharger kit and this is leaking right here, I mean, it'll only take you 20 minutes to get the supercharger off, but it's just an added inconvenience. So go ahead and make sure all your mating surfaces are clear and clean as you go to install it. And this is the top portion where the hard bar goes in. I was talking about before, it is just O-ringed, but you will want to make sure that you get all the grit and the junk out of here. I do generally lube the O-ring, whether it's just with some water or with like some lithium grease. Could be a bad idea, I don't know, but that's what I do, and it'll just pop right back in and it will go ahead and seal. You do want to make sure that you put the securing 12 mil and 10 mil back into the hardline crossover so that it does hold it down in here. I'm going to give this back to George. Oh, he's got a new O-ring, I think. Oh, you're going to take the one off the 8th Gen?
Yep, because that one is
all right, there you
known
go.
to be a good one and is fairly new.
Yeah, it's only got 49,000 miles on it.
Yeah, I don't trust the old one. So
there you go. That is a method.
Same size. He's got to line up this little nipple right there.
So there's a bump on the gasket that fits into a corresponding bump on the thermostat housing. Other than that, same size, same dimensions.
Yep.
And then we go ahead and reinstall with those 3 10mm bolts.
Alright.
Alright, so now we have the thermostat housing in. We're ready to go ahead and seat the coolant crossover bar. But before that, we are going to actually replace the thermostat itself, I believe, because George has a new one. So that's just the 3 10mm bolts that are on the front of it. It is again O-ringed, and it just pops out, pop a new one right in. This is much easier to do with all the space that we have than it is once the supercharger is installed. I have found if you're pulling these out of a junkyard, a lot of the times the original thermostats like to stick. So I do recommend replacing that if you are getting a used one. I don't necessarily find a need for some race rated super low coolant temp ones. I run the standard one and it works just fine.
You have to use all the race stuff.
Yes, race stuff.
You can't use nothing OEM.
Go ahead and hand that to me. So some people think that we are referring to this outlet port as the thermostat housing. That is not the thermostat housing. It is actually sold as all one piece. If you were to go to a parts store, this is what we're referring to as the thermostat. The housing is the component that is still left down in there that he is wiping up. The thermostats and the thermostat housings are not interchangeable between the upward and downward outlet ports, and that's why I said you should get both when installing these. Again, 8th gen K20Z3 is pretty much the only one you're going to have to swap this out, because all of the other ones are already the correct location. So he's still going to need to go ahead and cut off that electronic tab on the bottom. He's over there cutting it off with the side cutters. And that is just to clearance the back of the air conditioning pump right here. Otherwise it will make contact and you won't be able to get it fully seated.
So I got this one from Napa. Sir, it comes with a brand new O-ring. Here was the old one. Since it's come with a new one, I am not going to be reusing that. And for those of you that are wondering, just in case, I don't know if you can see it, but that's the part number there. Alright, for those of y'all that want to do a quick reference, I don't know how many what they hold in stock and whatnot, but that's the one. And we can show you guys later the old thermostat with the old housing, so you can see the differences as far as the whole lining up.
Alright, and as you were torquing these bolts down, you definitely want to go in, you know, a pattern, torquing them down slowly, as it is an O-ring, and you don't want to just suck one all the way down and pinch the gasket. That's why you will see him rotating through them, trying to get even pressure applied on the O-rings for both of these components so that it does seal properly.
You do not have to tighten the hell out of these. Once they stop moving, you get probably a little thumb pressure, and that's about it. If you really go over that, you are going to break, snap, and then you're gonna have to start square one and find another housing.
Facts. Alright, so we now have that installed, and we will next go ahead and put the rubber hose on from here that runs over to the K24 coolant bypass, and then we'll go ahead and resecure this here in just a moment. Alright, so here we have the 8th gen thermostat and thermostat housing, and you can see it has the upright direction here on this, and then we'll show you what happens if we were to try and put the EP3 one on. So we try and get it, and it has almost two bolt holes lined up, and the third one is just gone with the wind. Even if we were to rotate it to the upward portion, it is still not the same as this bottom right one. Does not line up. Once again, in the third possible position, they still do not line up, and that is why you need to go with the matching thermostat and thermostat housing.
There you go.
Hey, so we're actually back this time. We're not taking a picture. Same day, we went ahead and installed some Hasport mounts all the way around on this particular car, because that is what the owner wanted to do. From there, yeah, right, that's that guy. Next, what we did is went ahead and cleaned up the front of the block just because we could. We taped off the intake manifold ports and mounted up the thermal gasket, because the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to drill into the head for the ktuned K24 coolant bypass. So we have located the thermal gasket, using multiple bolts to make sure that it's stable, not going anywhere, because we're going to need it to clear, and to locate the ktuned coolant bypass appropriately. So we also went ahead and secured this lower right bolt here and this upper bolt from this tab to make sure that it is nice and straight. And now George is getting the drill together to begin drilling from here into the head, give us a good pilot hole, and then finally drill and tap so that we can secure this permanently to the head. And we're not going to have to drain the coolant anytime we're taking out the intake manifold like you have to do on a typical 8th gen. So that because you will have to remove the supercharger if you are going to be replacing things like the knock sensor or the starter. This does make life a lot easier as well. I've actually removed mine quite a few times to replace just those. So that is what we're doing now. Also, you get a beautiful shot. These shiny new Hasports that just went on.
So what level of sender are we going with?
It's your car. Alright, so no iPro. We're going with mining headlamps and a corded drill. Let's get it. I think you're angled down a little bit on your hand.
It's straight.
Okay.
Let's see if it's not there yet. It goes a ways.
It does. It's quite a thick piece of aluminum.
I think we're there.
Alright, well, so now we're going to go ahead and remove the coolant bypass, see if we made contact with the head yet. So we have a reasonable pilot hole.
I think that's a reasonable pilot hole. What do you think?
So, go ahead and come in, and we've got our pilot started right there. You can kind of see it right here. And that'll give us a location to start drilling at.
Because we haven't gone through this one yet.
Yep, so just barely going through the back of that.
Now we're through it.
Alright, so now we're all the way through the back of that. We went ahead and did that outside of the car. And we're going to go ahead and drill and tap into the head now.
I just want to make sure the screw provided goes all the way through first.
While we were in that huge edit out when we put the Hasport mounts in, we also went through and bent the AC line out of the way so it'll clear the supercharger. You have some options there. I know Craftwork makes a different AC line, or you can just get kind of crafty here like George on his cars, and he actually bends them down so they completely disappear out of the way here, so that we have room for the supercharger snout there, which you'll see later.
Bend at your own risk.
Yes, bend at your own risk. It is a soft line, however you can kink it, so take your time, be careful, and be confident. So now we're looking for the appropriate drill bit to get this drilled and started. Alright, so I'm going to sneak in here. So you can see that we did complete drilling the hole as per ktuned instructions. It wound up right about there. But like I said, we had mounted the coolant bypass and gotten our pilot hole. And now we're going to go ahead and mount the ktuned coolant bypass. We'll have a little bit of silicone as per the directions, and we'll go ahead and throw the factory coolant bypass hose on. Basically what this coolant port does is it allows the water pump to continue to circulate water through the head and back to the water pump while the thermostat is closed. So this whole coolant loop is important. Not something that you would want to block off on a car that is not running a thermostat. And the way we were installing this one is a semi-permanent install. We won't have to remove it. So we've got silicone. You're like glaring me out. All right, so we've got silicone all over the back. We want to make sure that we definitely at least get it around that coolant port. Make sure that we get a good seal. We'll probably use a little bit more than we have to, but like I said, this is semi-permanent.
Way more.
Yeah. But this is going to be one of those items that we pretty much never remove. And when we do, we'll probably need a sledgehammer.
Yeah, it's the best preferred method. I will have to take this out though because it'll be on the way for the manifold.
Yeah, so because we did drill into the head, we are not going to be using this tab up here. It uses that weird springy bolt.
I'm using it.
Okay, well, I guess George is using it. But you don't have to.
Facts.
There we go. The whole thing is completely covered and it's going to squish everywhere. It's going to be awesome.
It is going to be everywhere because I always did it. Too many tools in my hands. Just put these in.
Oh, sorry about that. We got the bottom one and the top one snugged. Now it's all up to George.
Perfect.
All right, now it is installed. We're going to remove this upper tab though. That way we can get the manifold on and off up here. And we will also be reinstalling this. I don't know if you want to use regular clamps on this or if you like the squeezy clamps.
We'll use those.
Just got to make sure the squeezy clamp is located in a manner that will not interfere with the manifold.
So K2 says that if you do the tap, you don't really need this thing, but I'm going to put it back.
Alrighty, George. I'm going to go ahead and install that bad boy. Let me get you your pliers. Whee! You can see our mess on the floor. That's what happens when you do motor mounts in between edits.
Yeah. I
Alright.
gotta get the K2 for actually doing a good job on that. I do like that motherfucker. There's a lot of things I don't like about it, about their products, but that one, that was boss. Where's the needle nose? I want the needle nose.
I do not know where the needle nose are. I don't believe I've used them. So you see there we have not secured that hard metal crossbar yet, and this is part of the reason why. Still allows you access to drop those clamps down on that L-shaped hose. If I haven't said it already, this install is very in depth, and we are trying to make sure that we cover everything while we're going through it, so that may be why these videos are a little bit longer. I can legitimately install one of these in an afternoon if we are not trying to make sure that we document everything perfectly for y'all.
Gotta be careful with that damn knock sensor.
Ka-ting! Knock, knock. Who's there? Alright, so we got that coolant line on. And then we are going to go ahead and reseat the solid metal bypass.
Well, I think we'll put some lube on it.
Yeah, he's going to put some lube on it. I'm going to make sure this back here is located appropriately. It is. And then we're going to go over the trimming of the lower radiator hose, and we will legitimately be done with the engine cooling system, aside from the upper radiator hose, which is a quick slap in. Just using some generic grease here.
Actually, it's Ford. It's not generic.
Okay, so not the most reliable grease, but
It's not.
and then you just grab it and you pop it. A little bit of work in there. George, do
We
it.
still got all this shit over here.
Yeah. There you go. Heard that pop. We'll go ahead and I'd bolt it back up. I believe this is the bolt for that one. Alright, we're back in it. Found the 12. We were going to go ahead and secure this bar down, and then we're going to make a modification where this wiring harness stay is right here. We are going to have to bend it down flush. Otherwise it will not clear the intake manifold. There you go. So unfortunately you lose your wire stay there.
Zip tie.
Yeah, zip tie. However, that is going to be something that needs to be done in order to do that. Next, what we're going to do, We've got the hardline reinstalled. We've got our coolant crossover reinstalled. We've got our coolant bypass reinstalled. And the next thing we're going to do with this lower thermostat housing is we are going to work on the lower radiator hose. So the factory 8th gen Civic Si lower radiator hose will work. What you're going to need to do is on this lower motor mount section here, there is a radiator retainer bracket, which is a 10 mil, which we're going to be removing right now.
Guess I'm doing it now.
You are doing it now. 10 mil open end, if you would, good sir. Because the radiator hose will sit in a slightly different position once we're done with this.
Okay, focus.
We can't do it anymore.
I think hunger's kicking in.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. You guys are wondering about the change in tone. We put in motor mounts, and it only took about an hour.
Yeah.
And now we're back to doing the supercharger thing. Realistically, the dashboard mounts probably took us as long as the supercharger install would have, but it's done now. So if you look at the factory radiator hose, the lower radiator hose, you can see that initially it scoops down towards the driver's side fender, and then it does this weird 270-degree loop back. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to break it loose at the bottom of the radiator, and we're going to rotate it. As you're staring at the car, we're going to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. And instead of doing this loop here, it's just going to come straight up and over, and then we'll trim off this angled portion of the hose here where it angles up, and then we will have a perfect shot coming up into there. We're going to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and pause, and I'll hit it when we come back. Alright, so like I mentioned, I took this lower radiator hose. Oh man, it's dark in here now, you can't even see. I took the lower radiator hose and I rotated it 90 degrees in. So now it comes straight up. Can you see that now? Come over to here, and typically this hose has a downward bend on it to match the upward neck. And we cut it off just below that angle, and it winds up lining up perfectly. The one bit of concern that I've really ever had is that this radiator hose is a little close to the upper mount now. Not close enough where it's kinked or damaged or anything like that, but during movement it may rub a little bit. So I typically do take this section of hose that I cut off, and I take a portion of it, slit it down the side like a hot dog bun, and go ahead and zip tie it on there just to keep it safe. But there is use of the lower radiator hose in all of its essence. Now we've got the intake manifold ports taped off once again to make sure that we are keeping any metal bits out of the engine. And this is where we are going to have to make a slight adjustment to the water pump housing here. We can go back over to the K20A2 here in a second, but the K20Z3 has a very, very slight angle, but it's pretty much square, and we're going to have to smooth that out. What we're going to be using is an angle grinder, a cool flapper wheel. I've never tried it with a flapper wheel, but we're going to see how it goes. We'll go over to the K20A3 head so you can see what I'm talking about, how this one is very, very angled, and the Z3 is not. So we're going to try and mimic that on the Z3 for clearance of the manifold. So there's no reason for me to really record him grinding, but I'll back up and let you guys watch because it's fun. Shield. That's why I never use the shield.
Hey, I want the shield.
So forewarning, this may make a mess, or will make a mess. Aluminum goes all over.
I'm gonna go compare to the cut in the medium.
Okay. All right, so as you can see, we went ahead and finished the rest of that grinding up there. We've already double checked it for clearance, and we do have it. Now we're going to go ahead and mount the manifold. So this top left bolt, your best bet is to install it onto the manifold before you put the manifold into the car. Otherwise, your spring-loaded tensioner is going to be in the way. As far as the harness goes, if you guys recall, we did bend this down so that it will clear, and then this harness here does need to come down a little bit. We actually found that we could keep this clipped in, I believe.
Yep. Not that one.
Not that one, because that went to the old thermostat housing, and then this goes ahead and drops right on. I prefer to start with screwing in the bottom bolts first. You know, there are many methods.
I don't want that.
That's just the one that I have. We're going to remove that extra clip now, so it's not in the car. Weight reduction.
Yep.
Anyway, so go ahead and take the manifold. I've already got the thermal intake manifold gasket on there because I'm not using any studs. You can if you want, just not my cup of tea. Go ahead and
it fits better with the gasket
drop
anyways.
it down in here. And go ahead and line up your bolts on the head. And the lower one should go right in. So I know on my kit it came with all Allen heads. I know Jose has made some adjustments. Some of them have been Allens in the past. Some of them are standard headed bolts. You just want to go ahead and make sure that you can get them all mounted up.
What size is that? 12 or
I
13?
believe so. These should be 12s. These little ones. Alright, so we've got the 3 long bolts, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to go ahead and put the top ones in, and that is the manifold install. As soon as we're complete on that, we're going to go ahead and drop our map sensor on and our IAT sensor in, and then we will move over to removing the EP3 idler pulley and slapping on the Mercracing tensioner. The EP3 idler pulley just has the 1-2 bolts that you need to remove, and this upper pulley will just come completely off of the car. You do need to release your belt tension here, which will be with a 14mm on the spring-loaded tensioner. So we did make one additional small tweak on the manifold where this spring-loaded tab is for the ktuned. It's a little bit different than the tractuff that I run on my car. We did have to take this recess section where the bolt fits, and we did widen it out a little bit. That way it would not be an interference problem with that spring tab for the ktuned. Coolant bypass. A little bit of Dremel work. I'm sure you could use a file if you had time. So next, what we're going to do, you can see that I already put the map sensor in, as well as the IAT sensor has been installed as well. You can get down in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the EP3 idler pulley and install the Mercracing tensioner. I'm going to pass the camera off. And it really is a pretty simple task. Right now I'm just going to remove the stock belt. Simple as pie. Stock belt is off. And then removing the 2 12mm bolts at the top of the EP3 idler pulley. Fake grunt. Alright, there we go. One bolt out. Alright, there we have it. There's your EP3 idler pulley removed, and we're going to be replacing it with the Mercracing tensioner. Now I do have the pulleys removed off of the Mercracing tensioner for install, and just because it makes this bolt easier to get to and easier to tighten. So as you see, the tensioning portion is at the top, and it simply replaces the EP3 idler pulley. And what this piece does is it'll give you that mechanical adjustability as well as way better belt wrap. So like I was saying, you get these two bolts in here, and removing the pulleys off of the tensioner gives you that ease of access, and then putting the pulleys back on is really quite a simple task. I did not pocket the 12. Means it must be. No, did I do that again? Here it is. Alright. And those 12s. And like I said, without these pulleys here, that actually gives you the ability to go ahead and tighten it very easily. George, you trust my tightening?
Yes.
Okay, that works. And then from there, reassembling that. You have obviously the smooth pulley assembly is your lower pulley. It is the non-adjustable one. And these are 14mm bolts or Allen heads depending on the generation that you have. And then you have the actual slider plate here, which goes back into there and allows you to put this back on. I generally don't tighten this upper bolt until you come to a conclusion on a belt size and you have done all your up and downward adjustments. If this bolt is tight, no matter how hard you turn this and no matter how much pressure you put on that, it's not going to want to slide. So you do leave this bolt just a little bit loose until you've come to your conclusion, and then go ahead and tighten that down. This is the adjustment bolt up here. As you tighten it, raises this pulley up and increases the total belt path, and as you loosen it, it will lower the pulley down and reduce the total belt path. Alright, so there's the install of that. Like I said, we're going to tighten those up once we're done and have come up to a belt size solution. So at this point, we spent a lot of time breaking the car down. We spent a lot of time putting motor mounts on. We've only spent about 20 minutes so far putting the supercharger kit on. We took an angle grinder with a flapper wheel to clearance for the intake manifold. We bent down that electrical stay just below the ktuned coolant bypass, and we mounted the ktuned coolant bypass. Other than that, the manifold went straight on. We've actually already got our injectors on. From there, we are looking at reconnecting some electrical connections, wiring up our IAT sensor, which we will actually go over here in just a minute. We're going to double check which wires it is, make sure we get that wiring correct, and make sure everything's ready to be plopped on. One of the things Mercracing has done on this kit, which was not done on the air-to-air kits, that I do want to go over, because it was kind of a pain on the older systems, is the new systems are actually O-ringed. This, again, is a serviceable O-ring on the base plate of the supercharger manifold, so you don't need to put any sealer on here or anything else. You drop this straight on, you go ahead and tighten the perimeter bolt, and the supercharger is installed. That's it. When you go to remove it, it's just an O-ring, it pops right off. It is actually a huge improvement and something that was not incorporated in the air-to-air systems. So we're going to go through real quick, check some wiring diagrams, and make sure we pull the right wires for that IAT sensor. And as we're in the middle of that, we'll pull you back in so that you can get the wire colors on the 8th gen for which ones we're going to be splicing. Yeah, that's good. Alright guys, so we're back. We obviously have the manifold already installed. We obviously have the Mercracing tensioner already installed. I have gone and thrown an 82.5 inch belt onto the path. We're going to test fit that here in a minute, see if it fits. We have installed the map sensor with the factory wiring on that, and we have installed the IAT sensor, which was a splice of the green and the red-yellow wire. You can actually find that information if you Google search Honda help file IAT sensor. It'll pull it right up from the flashpro help.
Polarity doesn't matter. Yeah,
polarity does not matter on the temp sensors. Like I said, just any 1/8 MBT IAT sensor will get you there. And at this point, we're about to plop the blower on, because that's really about all there is left to do, aside for some little knickknacks here and there. And we should have this thing running here in a little bit.
Alright, so earlier we stopped. We were getting ready to install the supercharger. Problem we ran into was the AC belt. Like I said, I was going to bend it. So, as you can see, that's how I bend it. Alright. And then the problem was that since we're using this super large pulley, which hopefully once I get cooled, I will change this to 3.5 like we mentioned before. We were barely clearing right here. It was hard to get this little bit of bend out so that it will clear. So it's good. I mean, if it takes a shit, I just get another one. But once we put the smaller pulley on, that's not gonna be close anymore. We managed to use the let me see which belt, which still has, it's right in the middle. All right, middle of the adjuster. Sorry for the lighting, but where's it at? This is the belt that we used. Alright, you can see the part number there. Fits perfect with the 8th gen with the supercharger kit and the stage 1 pulley, if you will. We installed obviously the blower. Still got some stuff, but this for the hood. I didn't have a plug, so what I used was one of my B series temp sensors. Got them laying around. We wired in the sensor and we plugged it in for the map, which is somewhere down that mess, and the air temp is also hooked up. Let me see, maybe from the bottom. Use my headlamp so I can show you guys. Where you at? So there's the temp sensor, and above it somewhere is the map sensor. Either way, it's in there. I used the for the brake booster. We got this hose right here for whatever the fucking other thing is. Tony's the one better with the nomenclatures, but this one ran down to the bottom one, and then the one for the bypass is right here, ran over. Took us a little bit of time digging through my crap of old stuff I had laying around because we couldn't go to the parts store and get new ones. So I was able to find these that I had laying around. This is from a B series also. So we're crossing the water over from the top down to this tube and got it plugged in. This is gonna be hooked up for show. It ain't gonna do shit. This is the math, because I'm going to use the stock air box. But like I said, the stores were closed because of the whole stay home orders. So whenever I can build a connector from here to the air box, I will, like I did on the Mugen. But yeah, right now Tony, Mr. Tank, is inside downloading ktuner. We forgot to do it earlier. And he's setting up my ktuner so we can give it a test run. While he's doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cut these and wire in the pigtails for the ID1000s, and then we'll put the cover on. We don't have antifreeze right now on hand because it's at the stores, but whatever, we're gonna still start it. It won't be a big deal, and then I'll figure out something for that later on. Not a big deal either. But yeah, this is what we're looking at right now. Speaking of the devil.
Hey, I don't need your password to set up ktuner.
Okay.
Alright, so this always happens when we get tired and we get excited towards the end of a build. We finished it, but we're going to go over the parts that we had left to do. So obviously, we mounted the supercharger. It fit perfectly. The clearancing we did on the water pump housing was perfect. It perfectly cleared the radiator support, and then we went and found a properly sized belt, which was an 83.4 inch belt for the stage 1 pulley, which was a 3.5 inch pulley on the 1320. From there, the next big thing you want to do is check your vacuum ports on the manifold and on the inlet. So if you look down here at the very bottom of the manifold, you may or may not be able to see it. There is a port down there. That port would be used for anything that needs to see both boost and vacuum. Typically an external fuel pressure regulator and just about nothing else. You come up to the inlet and you'll have either 2 or 3 ports on the inlet depending on the generation. And what those need to control, the smallest one needs to control your bypass valve. You can see here it kind of loops underneath and it connects to your bypass valve. Then you have the other 2 vacuum lines here. One of them is going to go to your brake booster. That's what this metal assembly is here. One of them is brake booster and the other one runs back to your evap solenoid. From there, your injectors. For this, we actually did the pigtails. It's hiding underneath this beautiful carbon fiber cover. But we did the injectors. We actually spliced them in, soldered them in, did all the good stuff there. Made sure that all of our sensors were plugged in. So our IAT sensor is plugged in. Our map sensor is plugged in. Our throttle body is plugged in. And because we are still going to go with the stock look on this particular car, we have plugged the MAF back in. Though that is not required if you are running an external IAT sensor like we are in the manifold. The ECU has to have an IAT reading from somewhere or it will set a check engine light. So that is a very important one to make sure that you plug in. One of the things that we didn't mention anywhere else in this video, and I greatly apologize, is, or at least not early in the video, is for the 8th gens we are running the Napa 7777 hose here, which gives you a whole lot of room coming off your throttle body for any intake that you're going to be using. This car, like we've talked about before, is going to be using the stock intake box, the factory battery location, and all of those other factory components. That radiator hose will still fit, and we're going to go ahead and run that coupler up to the upper portion of the intake box. That pretty much covers everything that we did while we were gone in editing land. You can see it's the 2nd day. Both of us crashed hard for a good few hours because we decided we were going to do motor mounts that only take about an hour.
Yeah, my bad.
But other than that, the car works well. We made sure that we burped the coolant. One of the tricks that George taught me is instead of lifting the whole front of the car up, and gave away your secret, he just lifts up the front driver's side of the car, which actually does help burp it rather rapidly, faster than any of my prior attempts. We'll go ahead and start it and show you guys that it works. If I can fit. I'll shut it off so you guys can hear me. But there you go. It fired right up first time. We actually wound up going with the flashpro because I'm not smart enough to make ktuner work. Yeah, so flashpro is the game that I would go with on the 8th gen. If you have other plans, then you can go ahead and go for it between you and your tuner. But that's why we didn't get it started up last night. And you see it starts up, it idles fine. We actually had it idling for almost an hour earlier to charge a battery that I killed by leaving a dome light on. And engine coolant temps are solid. Air intake temps are solid. Yeah, sorry about that. And yeah, everything seems to be working. So if you have any questions on the setup, make sure to comment below and I'll try and answer them. Check my other videos. I get back pretty quickly to comments. And we will be going through taking the car out, driving it, and seeing what kind of boost pressures and what kind of temps this thing is making. We also got sidetracked with some fog lights installs, so we're going to go ahead and finish that up and get to editing videos so that we can get these posted. But yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you got any questions, let me know.